So Rina, how have you been growing your ability to think over the years?
I think for me, reading plays a crucial role. And again, it just happened that I had some books in my house since I was a child, and then I started buying my own books, and yeah, reading books and seeing, so two type of books, so fiction and nonfiction. So how fiction books can help for me was, yeah, be more creative, thinking about things that don't exist in the real world. I'm a big fan of science fiction books, so that's very interesting. Like things that, you know, like it's not even around our radar. They're not going to happen in our lifetime, but so crazy stuff that you can imagine that it's possible. It's possible in that book. Probably it's not going to be possible, but again, it makes your brain see things in a different way. Right now I'm reading a book, a science fiction book that has such an interesting distinction about thinking and communication. There is a species in this book that for them thinking and communication is the same thing. You know, but for us, for humans, it's not like that. We can think, but we can communicate differently, or we can lie, we can mislead, we don't say exactly what we think. So even that is such an interesting concept. Like, I never thought about that thinking and communication is different for humans. So anyway, very interesting thing in fiction. And then in nonfiction, again, more like different theories, different approach, different research, science, information, and how people think about different things, the same thing how different people think about. So it just expands your thinking and makes you, again, see more possibilities. And I think books give us a chance to live multiple lives in a way. Like we are going to just live our life, but reading books, you have a chance to a little touch how other people live, how other people think. And that's, again, very interesting to me.
Beautiful, beautiful.
We all come to life with different skills and different talents. So what works for me isn't going to work for you. But what's most important to you is to figure out what those talents are. And sometimes you don't even know what they are because you haven't pushed yourself hard enough. And you may find out you're very good at something. Like I thought I was shy, I was introverted, I could never give a good speech, I could never be a lawyer. But I have given thousands of speeches, and each speech I give makes me a better speaker. And I've worked with coaches. Like the other thing is, and maybe this is the key message, but there are a whole bunch of them. You can't do it alone. Right? You need someone with more experience than you who can help teach you things you don't know how to do yet. And it may be somebody you're just observing because they are your mentor and you watch them in action and you absorb it that way. It could be someone you follow online. It could be a TED Talk you listen to. Or in my case, as I said, I didn't know how to write fiction. And literally, I didn't know how to write fiction. I was, my editor, when I showed her the first draft of my first fiction, said, it wasn't my first draft, it was like draft 25, said, this is okay for an amateur, Norm, but if you want to be considered a serious author, there are 10 things you need to learn how to do, and you can't do any of them. Like you can't, your dialogue is horrible. Your characters don't have any art. They all look the same. It's like, I was an amateur. So, but I mean, the wonderful thing about the internet these days is there's nothing you can't find online. There's no expert you can't learn something from. And in my case, I went out, it was during COVID, I learned online from like some of the greatest experts in the world on how to write better. So you know, one of the key lessons is you know, don't try and do it yourself. It's really important to learn from more skilled people who are going to teach you things. But in terms of entrepreneurship or professionalism, the two things you can't get away from, and this I start the book because I think it's really important, are we're all in the service business. And if you want to learn what that means, just think about who the best waiter is that's ever served you, and just try and be them. Just try and think about what do they do that makes you want to come back to their restaurant and to be served by them again, and start doing it in your life, and you'll see everything changes for you. That's
Wow.
part one. And part two is, like, one of the reasons I went into law, my father was a businessman, and he was great at sales, and I said I could never do that. I could never be in sales. That's why I'm going into a profession. And what I discovered the hard way is everything is about sales, because the product you are always selling is yourself. So as a lawyer, you're selling your arguments to a judge or to the other side in a dispute. So you need to develop confidence in your abilities. You need to know how to present it. You're always selling. And I used to think of sales as being frightening, just completely. I can't do that. There's another thing. I can't do that. I will never do that. And yet, when I look back on it, guess what? I learned how to do it. How? I watched people who were way better at it than me, and I said, okay, they're doing this, they're doing this. And that's what I put in Take Charge. I give it to you. I said, it's sort of okay, here are not only the things you need to think about, but here's how to think about it. And here are little steps you can take to improve it. And and if you're further along in your career, if you've just become a partner somewhere, or you're on the cusp and you know all the basic skills, or you think you do, I wrote a sequel to this called Never Stops. Same format, but just more advanced skills. Sort of how do you advance your career? The only way to advance your career is to make sure that you're not doing today what you mastered 2 years ago. That somebody more has taken it over, so you can learn how to do something you don't know how to do. And why don't we do it? And this gets back to the key point in Take Charge. So Take Charge and Never Stop, but Take Charge as the only reason you're not taking on something new is because you're afraid you're going to fail. And the more seen, like at the beginning, everyone expects us to fail. We expect to fail. We're learning, just like a child. And then the more you become expert at something, the more embarrassed you become to admit you don't know how to do something else, so you never learn it. Why? Because I don't want to be exposed as not knowing how to do this.
I had moved into the city, and somewhere in me, I knew my life was not working. There was something that just wasn't piecing together. I was depressed, and even though I might not have labeled it, I went along, and a friend of mine told me about therapy. And introduced me to a psychiatrist. And I made a choice to work with him for 7 years, 3 times a week, to figure out what was going on with me. How we all have masks. We hide. And when you're willing to drop the masks one at a time until you lay vulnerable, that was my choice. For 7 years, I worked on myself, and it was extremely painful. It was very challenging. I think it was one of the hardest times of my life. However, I knew if I could go through that, I could do anything. And that was a decision that I made, because somewhere deep inside, I think I had an image of where I wanted to go. And I knew I wasn't going to get to that image until I changed myself.
Wow.
And I did. And even after it, it took me time, but I really started to be different, act different. I took back my power, if you will.
So Terry, 7 years in therapy.
3 times a week. 3
times
times
a week for 7 years. It is a very long time. All right. So it's about 700 days. I put it that way. All right. And a lot of people want change to be so fast, to see the result right away. But and then because of that length of investment in times and efforts, even if they know that the future is promising, if they can pass through that, but they gave up along the way, maybe in 30 days, 50 days, 70 days.
Right.
And then you
Exactly.
gave yourself the permission to make that choice, follow with that one, and for years, for 7 years, 3 times a week like that, is how did you know that has to be a a decision, that decision is right for you, and you must follow with that path.
First of all, I didn't know,
Mm.
but I'm very intuitive. And slowly, I started unraveling my life. I started unraveling what was there, what was the mask I was showing when the pain was layers into me. And, I'd cry to the therapist and say, everyone I know is getting married. Everyone I know is having children. And look at me. I'm here on a couch working on myself. And in the end, that was my journey. Everyone's got their own journey. I can't tell somebody to go lay on a couch for 7 years. They don't do it anymore. Yes, people want quick results. But when you're working on yourself, it's not so quick. You're dealing with a piece of machinery in your head called your mind.
Mm.
And, that's what you're doing. You're peeling away the layers of who you thought you should be rather than who you are. And I don't expect anyone who's listening to do what I did. But however, that was my journey. Everyone's got their own. From there, I started studying Buddhism. I did a lot of modalities. I went on a Buddhist retreat. I went up to the mountains of New Mexico and slept on a bus. Here I am, a New Yorker, a sophisticated New Yorker who just peeled it all down and did this, which was amazing. So people, it's taking chances. I don't expect, people to look at me and say, they're going to do what I did, because my journey is very, very different than most.
Mm.
I have a mission, and who I've become is because of all the work I did on myself. I wouldn't be where I am today.
Mm.
Speaking to someone like you and other people, really, I feel really honored that you asked me to talk about a subject that I am now talking about in real life. This is what I'm talking about with people and podcasts and clients.
How do you define what wisdom is?
So wisdom is a mixture of things to me. It's what you've learned and you've taken the lesson from, but what you also learn from your higher self. Not just from this self. What has the higher self told you? That's when you're listening to the higher self. So you're becoming aware that you do have a higher self, and wisdom comes from that higher self, not from this self that's sitting here. That higher self that says, yeah, I learned that lesson, but here's a better lesson in that lesson.